The dawning of a new era in CSB sports.
We're so awesome that even our school wants us. You got to come on here. AllNoiseRadio.com, baby. We need your support. We appreciate your support. Look forward to our show every week.
Our new lunchtime spot, 12 to 1, bringing you a wide variety of topics in the world of sports.
Hockey, basketball, baseball, football. Get ready.
We work hard. We love sports.
The knowledge.
I just want to make you look bad, Ruggs, because you always make me look bad with your sports intellect.
The passion.
Hey, Jimmy, you're going to be the best-looking guy in the unemployment line, buddy. What a disgrace.
It's the Zuki and Ruggs Show on All Noise Radio.
Live from the CSB studios in Stratford, Connecticut, it's the Zuki and Ruggs Show, covering a wide variety of topics in the world of sports. I'm Ruggs, and Zuki is a little under the weather tonight, so I'm flying solo, and we're going to get into discussing the upcoming Final Four after a wild and bizarre regional semifinal and finals weekend. And then there were four. It's down to the University of Florida, the University of Connecticut, the University of Wisconsin, and Kentucky. And I don't believe anybody had all four of those teams competing for the national title. Crazy the way it happened and broke down, but very exciting games over the weekend, and we'll get into each and every one, and we'll break down the two national semifinals coming up on Saturday. And but first, we're going to discuss a topic that's come up in the national mainstream media, and that's the issue of pay for players in the college game. It may be getting closer than you think. Something that was always thought of as just unreasonable and never having a chance to actually happen has now been put into motion by members of the Northwestern football team who have gotten a go-ahead from the National Labor Board in essence. And there's the New York Times article that came out about the subject, basically stating that since players work for, in essence for the university with the hours that they put in, up to 50, even 60 hours a week, with much less time spent on their academics, and basically the reason they were brought to the university was not for their academics but for their athletic performance. Should they be paid? Should they be unionized as a labor force, so to speak? And should that take over all of college athletics, just certain sports? I mean, just it opens, Pandora's box basically with all these different things that could come from this. And now you got the appeals process underway, and we got a long, hard road, and the NCAA, the money-making machine that it is, the corrupt and often cowardly body governing college athletics now has kind of painted themselves into a corner. They've tried for years to make more and more money off of college athletics, and now it might be coming home to roost because the people that produce the sport that makes this money for the universities and for the people in the NCAA now want pieces of the action for themselves, and it's going to get very interesting and entertaining over the, for the media anyway, for the upcoming months and perhaps even years. When you enter into the legal realm, it could be a very long time before there's definite resolution, but certainly not what people 5, 10, 15 years ago would have ever thought would have been an issue. The amateur status of college athletes has always been a huge issue and a huge factor in how these universities conduct their business, and basically the NCAA has been able to cap the outlay of funds because at just whatever the worth is of a scholarship. And now if they have to actually pay for an hourly or by the a salary for the year to have these athletes compete, it changes the whole dynamic and what would be charged to go to an event, what events would be allowed, and some could even be just discontinued because they don't make enough money. So there really is a lot of disturbing things that could be, and it could end up coming out of this. And we would like to think that this could be turned around and there could be a equitable solution for this for all that could make the NCAA money but not kill what's left of college athletics, because it's really headed into a downward spiral. And really the greed of the NCAA has a lot to do with this. I mean, they need to make money, obviously, to function, but the amount of money that they want to make is they're almost willing to do anything to cannibalize the athletics that were at one time at such a high level and have steadily decreased with the advent of professional element. People don't want to put all this time and effort in and just have the compensation be capped at the value of a scholarship, although very valuable, and the education that they do receive is beneficial to the livelihoods of the student athlete. When you think of only around 2% of college athletes become professional in their sport, it really hits hard that 98% have to earn a living another way. And the education is obviously a huge, huge issue. And there's even referencing another article in the New Haven Register that suggests even tying coaches' performance pay to the performance not on the field or on the court, but the graduation percentage, which would certainly alter a lot of modern day compensation, because a lot of the great coaches via the wins and loss do not measure up when it comes to graduation percentage. I mean, you could take a Bob Huggins, who is about 28% graduation when he was at the University of Cincinnati, slightly improved that at West Virginia, but there's mainly around 50 to 60% of big-time D1 schools in basketball, and a slight bit more than that in football graduate. That's really kind of a disturbing number to digest and to try to tie into what it is these academic institutions are really put there for, and what kind of individual is supposed to be coming out of these places, and what kind of finished product you have when you're done. And it seems like almost an exploitation goes on of the athletes, the student athletes, that the ones who, you hear the stories about the ones who benefit and make all the money, and you say, wow, they're getting paid off. Who cares what kind of education they get or how much time, effort, resources are put into their education? But you hear, for every one story that's that way, you hear 10 and 15, 20 stories of those who did not make it and are bankrupt, jobless, homeless. I mean, the list goes on, of people who do not adjust as well, and the university does not take extra means to support them or to try to get them situated with employment or any other benefits, and they're just basically turned over to the world, and it's not pretty. And this is a major problem as this case develops, really, through the NCAA, they will appeal this and fight this tooth and nail. They do not want any kind of unionization of student athletes, whether or not you consider them to be primarily students who play sports for the love of the game, as the NCAA would put it, or if you consider them to be employees of the university, which is how the players put it. And they really are stressing, if nothing else, if not compensation pay, they want to be covered fully for medical, even after the key thing is obviously they're covered while they're playing, they're taken care of. But later in life, the aftermath of a college, we'll take football, for example, a college football career, and the wear and tear on the body of the individual that plays, the effects of what they've gone through in their college careers many times is not realized until many, many years later, in the aches and pains and the loss even of the ability to move around well, and sometimes at all. Those things, at that point, you're not covered. The NCAA does not want to hear anything later in life about, oh, well, you can't walk anymore at age 45. They're not running out there with a checkbook to cover your medical expenses or to figure out a way to place your lost income that you have when you can't work or can't move around, you're not ambulatory. It's it's a real problem. There's obviously legitimate concerns on both sides. The NCAA has a long, tough fight ahead, and many, many legal representatives for them at their disposal to fight this and put whatever kind of money it's going to take to battle, starting with Northwestern right here and their football program that's trying to get this union process going for and become basically a bargaining unit. It's going to be real interesting because this obviously is precedent for everything else. So whatever ends up getting ruled on or decided here, just like in any other court case, is going to be what is used as the standard for other judges and legal boards to decide on how this is going to be treated. Very curious to hear on our Facebook page and our YouTube comments on what you guys think out there about this. And I would love if you, and Zuki would as well, if you guys would comment and maybe we can have a discussion on it. Unfortunately, this is in the infancy, so we have a long way to go before we know exactly how this is all going to shake out. But the first little battle in the war went the way of the players. Northwestern got a judge to say, yes, you are employees of the university. You are not students per se. You work, your job is to play college football. That's what they brought you there for. So the NLRB, National Labor Relations Board, sided with the Northwestern football players, not with the NCAA. So now, obviously, we're going to federal appeals court with it. We'll keep you updated as we learn more, but this could be a very long, drawn-out process before anything else comes from this. But I think this is a very big topic to open the show with. When we come back from break, we'll get into what everybody kind of figured this show would be about, and that's March Madness. That's the Final Four. For local fans, that means talking about UConn and their amazing run to the East Regional Championship. And we'll be back on All Noise Radio right after this. After 30 days, most charge card companies give you a warning. But at Diners Club, we give you another 30 days. We understand that sometimes a 3-day business trip turns into 3 weeks, and by necessity, you could use some extra time to pay your bill. That's why we always give you the convenience of an extra billing period to pay when you need it, interest-free. Call us at 1-800-2-DINERS. We'll answer all of your questions, no extra charge. Diners Club, breaking the plastic mold.
I need that ball. Are you going to give me the ball? I'll get you the ball.
Talking sports.
I'm the man. You got me the ball. I got you the ball. You got the ball. You got me the ball. You got
It's the Zuki and Ruggs Show.
Go sit down now, Danny.
On All Noise Radio.
Back on the Zuki and Ruggs Show, talking NCAA basketball. Now it's time for the Final Four. So we'll go region by region and break down what happened in each of the 4 regionals, which took away probably what was left of your NCAA tournament office pool brackets and kind of got them ready for the shredder, because there was certainly some major upsets and lots of teams that everyone was high on that just didn't, for whatever reason, didn't have what it took to get down to Cowboys Stadium for the Final Four this coming up weekend. We'll start with the South region, really the only one that kind of went to form, as top seed Florida survived and pushed through, and they've been impressive. Let's face it, they really have not been tested down to the last trip. They have not had a game where they've been within a bucket of losing. They've been able to stay pretty well ahead in their games throughout. They started with a tough game with Albany, who hung around with them, but could not compete in the second half. It got away from them quickly, and Florida moved on. Then they had a pretty close first half with Pittsburgh, but took them apart in the second half. And UCLA, very talented team, stayed with them for a while, but Florida was always in control of that game, won by 6. And obviously they played the kind of Cinderella of the region there in Dayton, the 11 seed, and was able to come out on top by 10. Another game that you never really felt was in major danger, even though Dayton obviously was right there all the way. They were in contention. It was always going to take a big run, though, for them to go over the top, and you just never saw that coming against that Florida defense. The way Florida rebounds the ball doesn't give you a lot of second opportunities. Unless you're really hitting shots from the outside, it's tough to pry them out of, they really pack down on defense there, and when they're hitting their shots from outside, it makes them even tougher. The guards can play two ways. When they need to, they can put pressure on you and force turnovers. It kind of came, Dayton kind of came apart at the seams in crunch time, where it's not able to really get the game into single digits for most of late first half in through the middle of the second half. When they needed to make a run, they just could not get it close enough. And Florida moved on, and the one team that's really kind of done what they're supposed to, and that's get to the Final Four, is the 1 seed. We'll go out west Thursday when Arizona outlasted San Diego State. It was a game similar to the Florida game with UCLA. You felt Arizona was in control the whole way. San Diego State, though, is a very talented team. A lot of athletes. Good defensive team. Good team on the glass. But the one thing that I thought would get them, and it kind of did, was they don't knock a lot of shots down from the outside. They can get very cold and have periods of time where they aren't knocking down. And especially when you don't have a lot of threes going in, when your field goal percentage is low 40s, it really makes it tough to win. Arizona has a lot of players that can push the tempo, push the floor, get easy baskets. And I think in this tournament, easy baskets are at such a premium because, shots get tight. Guys get tight. They miss outside shots. You don't want to come down to 18, 20-foot shots to determine whether or not you're going to move on. You want to have layups and dunks. And also teams that shoot the free throws well move on. And that's gotten a lot of teams in this tournament, is not being able to knock the free throws down when it's been really on the line. When the chips have been down and are on the table, the teams that have been able to knock the free throws down are pretty much the ones that are still around. Down in the bottom half of the bracket, you had what kind of was an odd result. In my opinion, I really expected more out of Baylor. They came into that game with Wisconsin feeling pretty good about their chances of pulling another upset, and they got their clocks cleaned by Wisconsin. Wisconsin was tough. They play a style that nobody else plays. Their zone defense it's not the only team that plays a zone defense. They play it a little differently, though. They really kind of confuse the other team's offense. They take them out of sync. They play an ugly style of game. They play to their tempo. They don't like to get out of their rhythm. They like to really kind of muddy the waters, so to speak, and take the other team out of what they like to do best. And I thought Baylor just never got out of, stuck out of, they were stuck in neutral. They never got into gear. They never got out and running. They weren't able to knock any shots down to pry Wisconsin kind of out of their zone, and Wisconsin's very stubborn. They don't like to come out of the zone, whether or not they are giving up shots. I mean, you really have to shoot them out of it. You have to be able to penetrate, get to the rim, kick out, knock shots down, find soft spots, which is hard to do, and you got to hit your shots. When you play Wisconsin, you got to knock your shots down. I saw Big Ten semifinal, they played Michigan State. Michigan State shot them apart, and that was the way that you can carve this team up. They shot the lights out from outside. Even the bigs like Payne were coming outside, knocking three-pointers down, and just killed them. And Wisconsin was basically torched in that game. They were blown out. And that kind of gave me the feeling going in that Wisconsin wasn't going to be around for very long, and dead wrong on them. They've played tremendous basketball, and that set up Saturday's regional final when they went against Arizona. And I still thought Arizona had too much athleticism, too many guys that could score, too many options for Wisconsin to be able to beat. I expected a close game, but Arizona to win, and it didn't happen. You got the close game, went to overtime, but Wisconsin survived by 1 point, 64-63, and they're going to the Final Four. The Big Ten, you got to be impressed. They had an opportunity to get 3 teams to the Final Four. Wisconsin's the only one that made it through, but for a conference that's always maligned, and I'm include myself in that. I did not think they were one of the strongest conferences this year. I question how many teams they really deserve to get into the tournament. The bottom teams in that, the ones that were close to getting in, maybe shouldn't have, didn't perform that well, but they're top heavy. Their top 3 or 4 teams are very, very good. And obviously Michigan State, and Wisconsin all performed very well in the tournament, and Wisconsin's still playing and still alive for a chance to win a national championship for Bo Ryan. Kaminsky, the 7-footer they have, has played unbelievably well. He can hit him from the outside. That's what makes you a big-time pro prospect, when you're a 7-footer that can hit a 3-point shot and take his defender away from the basket and make shots, rebound the ball, play on the defensive end. Makes your draft stock really high. I mean, this guy's rising up the draft boards, no question about it. Now he's going to try to lead his team to a national championship, and they've cut the nets down in Anaheim. They're the West Regional champions, and they're moving on. And the other region, the semifinals, will go down and cover the Midwest now, which was kind of the beginning of the end of everybody's brackets. I know it was of mine. First game, not so much. Tennessee and Michigan. A lot of people had Michigan moving on, and they did. And they really got fortunate. They let a big lead go late in the game. Tennessee, who a lot of people were very high on. I know some pundits had picked them even to get to the Final Four out of that region, or at least to get another round further, because of how hot they were coming into this tournament and how athletic that they are, and how well they play defense, how well they rebound the basketball, and all these things that were going in their favor. And they certainly were disappointing early in the game and let Michigan get out to a big lead. But with about 6 minutes left, they just started coming back, and they really put a big-time scare on the Michigan Wolverines. And if it wasn't for a questionable call, an offensive foul with about three or 4 seconds left, that game, if they call the block there, they have 2 free throws to possibly tie that game, and that game may be very well going into overtime, and who knows what happens after that. So Michigan did survive the scare. Again, Beeline, give him credit. He gets a team that I don't believe is super talented. They have some players, obviously. Glenn Robinson III, excellent player. Totally different than Glenn Robinson II. Is much more of a slasher scorer type of guy. Not the big body, not the rebounding force, defensive presence that his dad was, but nevertheless a big-time player. They really make the most out of what they have, and that's what coaching really is, getting the most out of your talent, and Beeline does that. And he had that team believing all year long that they just were an elite team, and they moved on in that first game out at Lucas Oil Stadium and moved into the regional finals. Now we're into the Friday's games, so he moved into Sunday's regional final. And the late game was the one that kind of unhinged everybody's brackets, because Louisville, a lot of people had picked to win this region. I know I did. I thought they were one of the hottest teams coming in. I would not have been shocked had they run this whole tournament and won the title and went back to back. I didn't pick them to win the whole thing, but I picked them to get all the way to the final. They had Kentucky, who I did expect to knock Wichita State out, but I didn't think it mattered. I thought Louisville was just too good this time of year. Under Rick Pitino, I figured they're going to win either game. Obviously, the rivalry, the hate that there is between Kentucky and Louisville is going to make it interesting. You're going to have a very, very tough battle from Kentucky. Louisville expected that coming in, but they got out 21-5 on Kentucky, and I'm looking at this game and saying there's just no way that Kentucky can compete with them. Louisville is just hitting on all cylinders. They're up and down the court. Their defense is just extending tremendously. Kentucky's rattled. They don't have the experience to deal with this. They're 5 freshman starters. There's just no way this team can not come unglued and be able to come back in this game. They can make a run or two. They have just too much talent, but I did not think they were going to be able to come all the way back against that Louisville defense. The way Louisville rebounds the ball, the way Louisville can play in transition both on offense and defense, and with Rick Pitino standing on the sidelines, despite having Calipari on your own sideline, I didn't think it was going to happen. Give Kentucky all the credit in the world. They started knocking their shots down. Louisville got in foul trouble. That was when it really started to change. Louisville had to start sitting guys with 3 fouls late in the first half, 4 fouls early in the second half. They eventually started to lose players. They started to lose momentum. They were playing a lot of guys deeper on the bench, more minutes than they're used to. Kentucky took advantage of this. They were able to push the tempo. They started knocking shots down. Kentucky's very dangerous because they can hit shots. They're streaky. Sometimes they can really go cold, but at other times, they're very, very electric from behind the arc, and they got that way in the second half especially. Really made a big run before halftime, got right back in the game. You had to feel a little worried if you were Louisville at that point that you hadn't done a better job of putting away your hated rivals in Kentucky when you had that big early lead. And I thought, even though I liked the experience and the guard play on Louisville's end, the ability to get to the basket, to get easy shots, to have a lot of layups, to clean up missed shots and put them back, it started to just turn on them, and Kentucky really started to take that game over. And over the last 25, 30 minutes of that game, they were the better team. And Louisville was still able, they were still right there. It was a tie game late, but Kentucky made a couple of big shots, a real big putback by Julius Randle, and Louisville was not able to respond. They had a couple of chances. Hancock had a nice drive to the hole, laid it up, did not get the roll. It rimmed out. They were not able to get the rebound. They got called for a foul, and Kentucky, who is iffy from the line, and that's just something I think they're going to have to deal with going into the Final Four, because I don't see that improving. They're a team like Memphis was a few years back that just kind of lives with that, and that's another Calipari team, coincidentally enough. They're going to live with missing some free throws. They're going to try to make it up in volume, but they made the 2 key ones they had to make to extend it to a 4-point lead, and that's how it ended. And that ended Louisville's season. That ended a lot of people's brackets, because a lot of people had them either winning it or certainly in the Final Four winning that region. And Kentucky moved on to play Michigan in a rematch of a Final Four game many years ago with the Fab Five against Travis Ford and the Kentucky crew, and Jamal Mashburn and company, and that went the way of Michigan in an overtime game. Well, you had another classic in Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis for the rematch, so to speak. Obviously, that was many years ago, but these 2 storied programs went at it again. And great location, though. To have it at Indianapolis, nice and centrally located between Lexington and Ann Arbor. Another one of these huge football sites, not really meant to hold basketball games in. And unfortunately, the noise kind of dissipates up into the air when it's a stadium that's built for football and packing in as many people as you can possibly get in, rather than to keep noise. It's not a real arena, and we'll get into that next when we talk about the difference of the event being at Madison Square Garden. But it was loud, and big throngs of Michigan faithful as well as Kentucky, 2 excellent travel teams. Kentucky does it better than maybe anybody in the country. They'll go anywhere, though. The Wildcat fans, they're rabid fans, and they always show up, and they did enforce. And the game was lived up to the billing and to everyone's anticipation, and it came down to Kentucky getting the last shot, holding it down to about 3 seconds to go, and knocking in a 3. You hit a 3 at the buzzer, win the game, moving on to Dallas and Cowboy Stadium in the Final Four, and a date with Wisconsin, which will actually be the second national semifinal. We'll break that down a little later on in the show. Last regional that we're going to talk about at Madison Square Garden, the East Regional semifinals and finals, and you could already just sense the difference. It's been since 1961 since NCAA tournament basketball was played at MSG, and it was well worth the wait because it was an electric atmosphere there on Friday night for those 2 semifinals, and it was just something like you've never seen in an NCAA tournament. Like I said a couple minutes ago, it's a real arena. That's where basketball is meant to be played. The sound just vibrates and echoes through there like nowhere else. I mean, you just remember no matter what sport you have there, whether it's boxing at a championship level, whether it was the Rangers in '94 going for the Stanley Cup, how the place just shook with the noise level so high, and all the Knicks runs to the NBA Finals during the Ewing era, and even at the Old Garden before when the Knicks could actually win a title, the place just sounds like nowhere else, and it just is a great atmosphere for particularly basketball. I mean, for really any sport, but basketball there at the Garden is like, just don't have it anywhere else to the same level and the same crowd excitement and participation and, frankly, crowd knowledge. I mean, the average New York basketball fan is just very savvy about the game. A long history of college ball being played in the city, big-time games, big-time players and teams. I mean, a good portion of the all-time greats came out of that city and out of that backdrop. So it really made an extra special night, and it started with Iowa State playing UConn. Obviously, we talked about this last week. UConn was going to have almost a home court advantage playing here because of the proximity, because of the well-traveled fans of Connecticut. They'll go anywhere, but they're really going to go and pack Madison Square Garden because that is just, it's close. I mean, it's easy for them to get to. They have ways to get there, public transportation to get down there. They're going to pack the place every time a big game is going to be played there. And there's none bigger than having an NCAA regional semifinal and final. It just never happened before. Tickets were getting scalped up to $4,700 a ticket. Just unbelievable. I mean, just pricing the other team's fan base right out of it, basically. And UConn came to play right off the bat. First half, they jumped all over Iowa State. I really thought it looked like a college team versus a pro team in the first half. UConn played an NBA style, kind of using Iowa State's game plan against itself. Iowa State is a very pro-style offense and level of play. They play pro-style defense too and play a lot of man-to-man and a lot of matchup, one-on-one offensive sets, a lot of pick and pops, very similar to how UConn played them in the first half. They just did it a lot better, and they were able to push the tempo in it. And they were 7 for 11 from behind the arc early in that game. They just shot the lights out, and Napier was red hot. And then DeAndre Daniels had the game of his career. They got out to a large lead. I mean, they were pushing close to a 20-point lead. They got it up, I believe, as high as 17. And Iowa State just had such a hole to dig out of. They really played very well in the last 10, 15 minutes of that game. I thought they actually were the stronger team coming down the stretch, and UConn was kind of holding on. But the one reason it's so tough to catch them when they have the lead on you is they do not miss free throws. They get to the line and they make them. And when a team's shooting in the 90s for a percent from the foul line, you're going to have a very tough time making up the difference. I don't care if you're making three-pointers. I don't care if you're scoring every time down. If you're going to have to foul a team that's adept with great guards that just are very savvy and know how to get themselves to the line, get to the basket, get to the line, and they're making them all, you have a very difficult and complex problem to try to get back. You can't fall way behind this team and expect to win a game in the second half to pull it out over them. It's very, very difficult. And they handle the ball well, and they play they're very underrated on defense. Everybody talked about, we'll get into the next game, which was Virginia and Michigan State, talking about how the two best, perhaps, defensive teams in the country were locked against each other. UConn kind of hid in the shadows and said, hey, we'll match up defense with anybody. And it would show on Sunday when we'll get into that in a minute, but it certainly took Iowa State out of their game early. They missed George Niang, no doubt about it. He shortened their bench considerably. He was another low-post guy that was not able to make a difference around the rim. And his injury certainly was a key factor, but I don't know with that MSG mojo that UConn was losing to anybody this weekend. I really don't. And obviously they proved that the 7 seed was bogus. But, hey, if you're going to give them a 7 seed and put them through Buffalo down to Madison Square Garden, maybe that's just what they needed and just what they wanted. Underseed them, let them have a road to the Final Four that went through Madison Square Garden. It turned out to be a huge advantage, and they were able to eliminate Iowa State 81-76. Then in the nightcap, a game that kind of almost like a throwback game. It took college basketball back about 60 years. Game played down in the 50s and 60s, and just a real defensive struggle. Points were just tough to come by. It looked like teams were just even I don't think I can remember a game with so many shot clock violations. Teams just couldn't get into their offense at all, couldn't get shots off. Excellent defense on both ends between Virginia and Michigan State. And even though Michigan State had a 4-point lead at the half, you felt that they were in real danger, that the crowd was – Virginia did an excellent job bringing people up. I thought that they would. They're about a 7-hour ride or so from Charlottesville up to the city, 7-8 hours. And they don't get here a lot. The last time they were in a regional final was 95. The last time they were in the Final Four was 84. So, this is something that they wanted to really get a hold of and enjoy and try to support their team and knock Michigan State off. And it looked for periods of that second half like that's what was going to happen. They got the lead, and their defense just did not look like it was going to give it up. It was tenuous. It was around a 3-point lead. They had 4-point lead. They never really got out, and they don't have the offensive explosiveness to put away and blow out a team like Michigan State. Michigan State plays defense very well and rebounds very well, and unless you have explosive guards and great shot makers from the outside and the ability to really push the tempo, you're not going to put Michigan State away that easily, and Virginia could not put them away. And Michigan State just kind of wore them down. And Payne, who was in foul trouble for a lot of the game and not a factor, started to become a factor late. Trice made a couple of big threes to get Michigan State that boost when they really needed it and to push them through to the end. The defense at the end of the game by Michigan State was tremendous. Virginia just could not make the big shot. Their shots were getting contested. They were getting blocked. They were one and done on almost every possession coming down the stretch. Early in the game, they were able to get some offensive boards, keep some plays alive, score on some second chance opportunities, energize that crowd, and it just down the stretch, it was just not able to happen for them. And it was another number one seed that got bounced. Michigan State moved on to play UConn. It was kind of game that I felt all along, even though I had picked Michigan State to win that region, that UConn had an excellent chance to win. They played Michigan State the year before and had beaten them in the infancy of the Kevin Ollie era, and a game that really kind of took off for that program what was going to become the post-Calhoun era and made everybody kind of forget that Calhoun wasn't there anymore and that it was a new day and a new program, and this team can compete on a big level, and gave them a lot of confidence. And this was sort of a rematch for these two teams, but obviously with a lot more at stake. And I felt UConn would, especially at Madison Square Garden, would compete right down to the end and have a chance to win. And that's ultimately what happened. They jumped out, raced out of the gates again, looked very NBA-like in the first half with the way they pushed tempo. The passing was just so crisp and smooth. The only difference between this game and Iowa State is they were not knocking their outside shots down the way they were in the Iowa State game. If they had, they could have got out to a huge – they jumped out to a 10-point lead, which probably could have been and maybe should have been 15 or 20. But they were having difficulty knocking the shots down. Michigan State weathered the storm. And that's Michigan State. That's Tom Izzo. That's what a great team and a great coach does. They don't get rattled. They may bicker a little on the sidelines, and they were definitely doing that. You could see the intensity on that sidelines. People that I know that were at the game, as loud as that place could be, I mean, you could hear the screaming going on and the cajoling from Izzo. Let's go. Let's get it going. Let's start picking up our level of play. Let's get that defensive intensity up. And it clicked. And you got experienced, talented players and an experienced, ultra-talented coach, and it started to take over the game. Michigan State started to chomp into that lead and eventually got the lead and went into halftime 25-21. And when UConn scores 21 points in a half, you know that somebody's playing some real tough defense with those guards to hold them down the way they did. And they started out the second half like they were going for the kill, and it got to be danger time for UConn in a hurry. They got down as much as 9, 32-23, and that's when UConn just hit some kind of switch, and a lot of it was egged on by the crowd. Napier hit a very big three-pointer to cut it to 32-26. Then they made a stop and actually a steal, and Napier found DeAndre Daniels ahead of the field for an easy lay-in, and at that Michigan State just kind of lost them on defense when they were trying to get back. They didn't pick them up. Easy bucket. It was 32-28, and then the crowd just kind of hit another level. It's like a switch was turned in the crowd. As loud as they were the whole first half and the beginning part of the second half, they just got to some other level, and it was deafening in there, and they went on an enormous run, and they turned a 9-point deficit into a 10-point lead, and all of a sudden it was 49-39. And Michigan State, again, as they always do, answered right back, hit 2 quick threes, made it 49-45. But then they got into everybody's conundrum playing UConn is these guards are going to drive to the hoop and they're going to draw contact, and NCAA tournament officials cannot help making these calls. They're always going to blow the whistle. They'll let play on go a lot, and especially in the first half of games, they'll try to establish a game that they're not going to have the quick whistle. Baloney. Down the stretch, these guys are going to blow their whistles, and UConn's used that really to their advantage in this whole tournament. They've basically won all 4 games in the same kind of formula. They've gotten out, and other than the Iowa State game, they've gotten behind. They've kind of had to come back after halftime, regroup, but in the second half, they get the other team to start collecting team fouls. They get you in the bonus quickly. They get into the double bonus with a lot of time left, and they just live at the free throw line and make every one of them. The minimum streak that they've had for free throws in a game has been 13, and they've had to have 4 games in a row where you've had at least 13 consecutive made free throws. It's unheard of. It doesn't even happen at the NBA level. It's something that other teams are not able to deal with. They're not used to having a team not miss from the line. It makes a world of difference. It raises the level of that team by just another grade. It makes a B-level team an A-level team. Just that factor. It's that important. And if they were hitting their shots from the outside, I mean, to be honest with you, they would have pasted Michigan State yesterday. They still ended up with a 6-point win. They had a couple of key defensive stops. They just, as tough as Virginia was on Michigan State, I don't think they would say afterwards that UConn was any easier to play against. They just took their guards on the offensive end right out of the game. Boatwright and Napier just got up in their faces, underneath them, on top of them, forced turnovers, shot clock violations, the whole bit. As gamely as they fought, they went down. And, as always, Coach Izzo classy after the game, admitted it was not their best game that they played, and it wasn't, but gave the credit to UConn for doing what they needed to do to win the game and to move on. And they'll get Florida in the semifinal. The first semifinal down in Dallas in the Final Four, and we'll break those 2 games down when we come back from break on All Noise Radio. You gotta see it to believe it. For a limited time, the whole store is on sale. That's right, every item is reduced significantly, up to 75% off in some cases. With over 400 camcorders to choose from, our video recorder department is stocked and ready to deal. And get this, we've got over 100 different computer systems ready for immediate blowout. It's CompUSA's biggest sale ever. Sale ends Sunday.
Talking sports.
All right, B-boy. Who's the one and only master?
It's the Zuki and Ruggs Show. CSB Sports on All Noise Radio.
Back on the Zuki and Ruggs Show. And we're going to break down the Final Four from Cowboys Stadium, the house that Jerry Jones built. It's going to be a spectacle, I'll say that, for the Final Four. you're used to Final Fours being played in these enormous football stadiums that don't resemble a basketball arena in any way, shape, or form, but this is going to be the ultimate in opulence. I don't know how else to put it. It's going to be a spectacle to have basketball there at this level. You're going to have 4 fan bases that are extremely rabid and ready. I mean, you're really going to have a good turnout of basketball fans. I mean, you're always going to have a turnout at a Final Four. You're going to get that corporate element, but really you're going to have 4 very loud and engaged fan bases. Obviously, Florida known more for their football fan base, UConn known for the basketball, Kentucky obviously basketball all the way, and Wisconsin, though, is an underrated, rabid fan base. I mean, I saw the way they turn out for when we went to the Frozen Four, Zuki and I, for their women's hockey team. Definitely out of the 4 schools had the most showing and coming from the furthest away, and it didn't bother them at all. And you see it, the regional that they just came out of in Anaheim, they traveled well. They were at least as loud as the virtual home team, which was Arizona. They showed out well and in force. They do it for football. You see when they play in a Rose Bowl how heavy the crowd is in Badger Red there. I mean, they do a great job of traveling, and Kentucky is really the ultimate in college basketball as far as the traveling fan base. It's kind of what others model themselves after, North Carolina, Kentucky, Kansas Jayhawks. They're really at the top of what it's all about. And so it's going to be interesting from that standpoint. The games could not be more entertaining, the possibilities of how these games could go down. The first semifinal, which is going to tip a little after 6 p.m. on Saturday, is going to pit number 1 Florida out of the South bracket and 7th seeded Connecticut out of the East bracket. And this is a rematch of a game on December 2nd that UConn won on a Shabazz Napier shot at the buzzer, and it was Florida's last loss, which is just amazing from that long ago to play the schedule that Florida plays in a major conference, to win that many games in a row. Advantage for Florida is they're going to have this revenge on their mind. They feel probably better that they've played against this style of team in UConn, that they're not going to surprise them with their intensity and their guard play, which I think a lot of teams that get them for the first time have a lot of trouble with. And Florida's got a lot of depth. They've got a great defensive team. Their inside game is what's the major problem. UConn has to control the inside game. Michigan State liked to play away from the basket. Iowa State had an inside game to some extent, but it was weakened without Niang in the lineup. Villanova and St. Joe's liked to shoot the ball. They were playing away from the basket for the most part. I mean, they had some inside and interior play, but Florida really can pound the ball on you. If UConn can't figure out a way to get them off the glass, limit their shot attempts, and stay out of foul trouble, they're not going to be able to win this game. But I mean, I think they have an excellent chance, being UConn, to keep this going. What they've done, their formula for winning has been sound. It works in the NCAA tournament. They're not a 7 seed. The seeding did not match up. I mean, Kentucky was preseason number 1. UConn was a top 20 team virtually the whole year. These teams are not Cinderellas. You got 4 solid clubs, and any of them can win this. And I took Florida on the outset of the tournament. I thought their defense, their rebounding, because defensive field goal percentage is generally a major stat. When you look at the teams that win these things, these NCAA tournaments, you look at field goal defense is one of the top indicators, and Florida does it better than anybody. But UConn's really, really close. They've caught up in a big way. Their field goal defense has been as good as anybody's lately. They pressure the ball at least as well as Florida does. Both teams shoot free throws pretty well. UConn's been just unconscious, and if they keep that up, I think they're going to beat anybody. I'll take Florida in a tight one only because I'm just going to keep picking I'm going to stay with my brackets, which have been terrible. But I got a real urge to pick UConn here. Love to see them pull it off for Kevin Ollie. It was great that everyone thought maybe the program was done when Calhoun left, a lot like UNLV when the Tarkanian era was over. It was just like the program's never really come back. And a lot of people thought that could be the case with UConn. And it's nice to see that very quickly he was able to get them back here. I mean, this is going to be a fun game. It really could go either way. I'll take Florida. And again, UConn's been moving on as I've been picking against them. So I don't want to do anything to tip over the apple cart. And I like for them to keep winning and proving everybody wrong. It's going to come down to, obviously, UConn's guards, how they can impact the game. They're going to need another strong effort out of Daniels. He's inconsistent, and he didn't play a great game against Michigan State, and they were able to get by because of their defensive effort and because Napier took it to another level. They're going to need some more contributions. They didn't get a ton out of Brema in the Michigan State game. They're going to need him. They're going to obviously need Daniels. Boatwright and Napier have to continue to play strong. And somebody else, whether it's Gaffey or Samuels or whoever it is from the bench to make an impact in this game to really, if they want to pull the upset here and beat Florida again for the second time. Very interesting style matchup. This game, you could see these teams get out and run a game that can be very entertaining and up into the 70s, and you could see these teams pack it in and play kind of a bloodbath and be another game in the 50s. It's going to be interesting. I don't think either team really loses a lot of advantage no matter how, whichever way the game is played. I wouldn't say Florida couldn't win an up-tempo game, and I wouldn't say UConn couldn't win a slowed-down version of a half-court game. I think it's going to be which team runs when they want to run and dictates the pace and gets easy baskets out of their transition. That's going to pull through this game. And UConn obviously has to continue to get to the free throw line and knock their shots down. That's going to be the equalizer and perhaps the difference maker for them. Tough to pick against UConn now the way they're playing. I'll take Florida in a close one. Now in the nightcap, you got, again, two teams. UConn and Florida play somewhat of a similar style. These teams are like night and day. Kentucky's style and Wisconsin could not be more different. Wisconsin's pretty much different from everybody else. I mean, you could say they're a little like Syracuse with the way they play their defense, but their offense is what's really different. They don't play offense like anybody. They pass a ton. They do a lot of what looks to be standing around doing nothing. It looks like they just pass the ball around in formation, which when I'm watching, I'm like, this team cannot be good. You look at them, they just what Bo Ryan does with these guys, you're just like, this cannot be successful. But they play to the prescribed formula of their coach. They pull things off the way it's designed, and they make it work. And they're a team that when they're hitting their shots is just so tough to deal with. And again, they can look terrible from the outside and just hit every part of the iron and really get, like I said in the game with Michigan State in the Big Ten tournament, really get embarrassed and roughed up and look like a pretty bad team at times. They were struggling big time in their first game. They had American University who had them down, and I was thinking maybe this was going to be a big upset and they were going to be one and done. But Oregon had them down 12 at the half, and it looked like they just didn't have enough athletic ability to stay with Oregon. And I was like, despite the home court advantage, they weren't going to be able to come back, and they came back. And they played another team similar to Oregon with the athletes of Baylor, and they ran them out of Anaheim, out of the Honda Center. And then they had a mano-a-mano war with number one Arizona. Wisconsin got it done, and they play another team that totally outclasses them in the athletic department in Kentucky. Calipari's Fab Five, so to speak, with his 5 freshman starters, is going to be in for a stern test. I like Kentucky because when you look at their players, their athletes on the court, you think they have really the edge at just about, other than maybe the 7-footer Kaminsky, they have the edge at every other position, I believe, goes to Kentucky as far as the player at the position, but it's a system game with Wisconsin. If their system is working and clicking that night, they're going to beat anybody if they're on. And Kentucky, still a bit undisciplined, still does some things that make you scratch your head. They're inconsistent. Cauley Stein was injured, didn't play in the Michigan game. You got to see whether or not he's going to be able to go with his ankle injury. Big thing for the Wildcats to get him in there, obviously. I'm still going to take Kentucky here to move on. I like Calipari in these kind of games. I thought it was a real feather in his cap to take out Rick Pitino in that regional semifinal, and he's on a roll right now. This Kentucky team, which was preseason number 1, is finally starting to play. This is what the writers saw when they picked this team as the preseason number 1, is the way they're playing now. The talent's getting through. I think Wisconsin's just going to have trouble. These Final Fours, they tend to be rough on shooting teams that rely on making the outside shot. They just don't seem to fall in these cavernous buildings. I mean, you can't have a more cavernous building than this Cowboy Stadium's going to be. It's just enormous. For whatever reason, the rims just don't seem to be kind to the teams that rely so much on the outside shot. I worry that Kentucky's just going to get too many easy baskets, and I like them because of that. I'm going to move them into, and I guess an all-SEC final, a rematch of the SEC championship game. Watch out for this to possibly be UConn-Kentucky, but I'm going to say Florida-Kentucky in this one. I actually picked Kentucky to beat Florida in the SEC championship, and Florida hung on. I'm going to pick Florida to win this time and get the national title. Wouldn't surprise me if Kentucky finally got him and nipped them at the buzzer. And again, I wouldn't be surprised if UConn got through. I think Florida's probably your betting favorite going in, and I think they're going to get it done. Billy Donovan, another great tournament coach against Calipari, to be a great matchup of two legends in the business and two experienced guys and getting it done at crunch time. And I'll go Billy Donovan here. I'll go Florida. Close one. High level of talent on both sides. I'll go with the experience of Florida. Kentucky will break down defensively from time to time, and Florida tends to not break down on defense. And I think when you really need to stop these games, you do. You need those empty trips from the other team at key situations, and I think Florida will be able to get that done in a must spot, whereas Kentucky, I worry about that. And on the offense, when you have to have a score, I like the experience of the Florida guards in that interior game they have with Patrick Young to just be a little bit better than Kentucky's, but would be a great final. The maligned SEC, the SEC who a lot of people didn't think deserved any more teams than just Florida and Kentucky. And look, you may have it. You have two of them in the Final Four, and you may have them playing for a national title, and one of them might very well turn out to be the champion. So you got to give it up to the SEC. They've done a good job redeeming themselves. And in a classic battle of two SEC teams, I'm going Florida. So we'll be back to discuss it next week and see how it turned out and how my brackets and your brackets and everybody else's brackets kind of bit the dust over this crazy March that we've had. And that's all the time we have for this evening. We'll be back next week to hopefully kick off spring. I know we're getting some winter weather here again today. It's unbelievable. But we'll kick off spring finally. We'll talk opening day baseball, and we'll get into projections for this upcoming season, and we'll wrap up what happened in Dallas at the Final Four and possibly discuss some other topics. If you want us to touch on a topic, just comment on our page, and we'll try to work it in there into our show. Look forward to talking to you soon. So take care. Good night from the Zuki and Ruggs Show on All Noise Radio. You promised yourself you'd do something someday. Now you can keep your promise. It doesn't take much to help needy children around the world. Just $20 a month and a lot of love. That's all you need to be a Save the Children sponsor. This is not a handout. It's a hand up. Clean water, nutritious food, and education. For just 65 cents a day, you'll help make changes that last a lifetime. Experience the joy of keeping a very important promise.
Go to allnoiseradio.com. Click for A&R Sports. Listen to the Zuki and Ruggs Show every Friday from 12 to 1. Powered by Live365.com. All Noise Radio, the noise you can't ignore.
All Noise Radio.
Grew up to be strong, straight.
Powered by the Connecticut School of Broadcasting.
Aw, shame.
All the noise.
You're too short for that gesture.
All the time.